A joke I just heard earlier today was about the two worst things people fear the most is death and giving a presentation. So giving an elegy of your death is about the worst thing you could imagine. And giving a presentation is worse than death. Right. Back in the days of Dyalog, version 11, or was it 12, I had a version of Dyalog on my mobile phone running Windows CE. I don't know. That's the phone. And my phone had a touch screen and a stylus. And it reminded me of the stylophone I used to have, which I bought back in 1967. The stylophone was a miniature analogue electronic keyboard musical instrument that played with a stylus, currently available from Amazon at £24.99. So, via APL, I decided to turn my expensive smartphone into a cheap stylophone. Now, music is about relative frequencies, amplitudes and timings. This information may be converted into numbers and written to a file. One such file format is the WAV file, which is very well documented. This is the documentation about the formatting of a WAV file. It's not very interesting, but has some important information in it. The WAV file records samples and plays, those samples are instantaneous values of the sound at that instant, and it records something, the sample rate, and in this case for a CD quality it's 44,100 samples per second, and these samples are 16 bits per sample. So this is the format of the header information that has to be written out, and that is followed by 44,100 samples per second of music, which follows it. And these files are huge, but they produce very good quality sound out of them. All the code I wrote for my stylophone was in Dyalog APL, except for the play sound function, which is available to the APLs via the quad-NA call to DLL. When the phone's stylus touches the image of the keyboard on the screen, it would play a WAV file. The actual file it played was dependent on which keyboard point was touched. I created one WAV file for each note represented by the position on the screen's keyboard. I tried various wave forms and found that a simple square wave was best. I'd initially tried a sine wave, but at low frequencies the volume quickly fell off to almost silence due to the very small loudspeaker on my phone. So this is my attempt at playing Bach on a stylophone. Anyway, trying to play Bach with a pointy stick did not really work for me, as you've just heard. Dyalog Pocket APL required very few changes to run under a standard Dyalog APL W on a PC, so I tried that. But running stylophone code on my PCs with mouse was even less successful. The mouse movements were not recorded, but that's no great loss. Since replacing the stylus by the mouse failed, I did not bother to try to rotate the keyboard as it went on to work with the ants. Earlier this year, after reading an item in one of the Dyalog forums, Sounds with Dyalog APL by J.S, 30th of March 2023, I decided I should try to update my stylophone code. A typical WAV file is recorded via one of the more microphones, passed to a computer where the analog to digital conversion occurs. That is, the incoming sound pressure waves is converted into thousands of individual samples. The wave file consists of a header section, which you've seen, defining the various parameters, such as the number of samples recorded per second and the number of bits data in each sample. The number of channels, mono or stereo, is also. This is followed by a set of sample values. A CD quality WAV file uses 44,100 samples per second, but you may wish to select and use any rate you wish. I decided to bypass the analog to digital conversion and get the computer to generate the samples directly from the frequency and timings of the note that Bach had written. I've been in possession of a score for BMV 565 since 1970. I don't know. It's complex, and I have difficulty reading music. The length of the classical Western music note differs and have different names in both America and the UK. Double notes, or brave, whole notes or semi-breves, half notes or minims, quarter notes or crotchets, eighth notes or quavers. From here on down, the British names get ridiculous. Semi-quaver, demi-semi-quaver, hemi-demi-semi-quaver, semi-hemi-demi-semi-quaver, etc. How long is a quarter note, you may reasonably ask? It depends on the time signature of the tempo. In 3/4 or waltz time, there are 3 notes to the bar, or 3 quarter notes to the bar. BMV 565 is in common time, that's 4/4 time, and then it is 4 quarter notes to the bar. The tempo is defined as the number of quarter notes per minute. At 60 beats per minute, some might call that largo, the tempo notes are not exact. A quarter note lasts a second, so there are 32 semi-hemi-demi-semi-quaver, that's 1/128 per second. Now the tone A4, that is note A above middle C, is an internationally recognised standard for musical pitch at 440 Hz. If I select to use a sample rate of 44,000 samples per second, A4 will require 100 samples for each full wavelength. The length of the note will determine the number of wavelengths. I decided to measure time in samples, always an integer, rather than subunits of seconds. The first item on my list was to try to play a chord rather than a single frequency using a wave file. A chord is a group of 3 or more tones sounded together to form harmony. According to all the documentation, all I needed to do was to add the values of the frequencies being played, the value being the 440 samples per second, twice that if it's in stereo. This is right 8-bit chord. These are the header information that I showed earlier in the WAV file, the RAF wave format type. Channels, 2 channels, 440 Hertz, 44,000 samples per second, and we've got an 8-bit 8-bit data. We write the data out. Write out a sine wave at one sine wave 1.25 times the sine wave and 1.5 times the sine wave, and that should produce a chord. So let's see if I can... chord 8. So this is what it sounded like. Horrible. When I tried, the results sounded awful. After some trial and error, I found my problem was the bit rate of 8 bits per sample was okay for a single frequency, but was far too low for most chords. So I went the full hog and now use 32 bits per sample for each channel. So I should now be able to play the equivalent chord method. I'll play that again. That's a reasonable chord. With the function right chord in work, I've shown right. The difference between the volume between the 8 bits and 32 bits had to be taken into account at this point. The 8 bits naturally is louder than the 32 bits unless I take that greatly into account. The next stage was, rather than write one wave file per note and then play them in order required for the tune, as on the stylophone, was to write a single wave file with the whole tune, so one wave file per tune. So for a simple tune, short with no chords, the process was trivial. What about Bach? Something more complex. Better, but no cigar. Notice, I don't know if you noticed there were extra sounds between each note. This was due to the effect of cutting a note mid-phase and producing a discontinuity. I spent a lot of time investigating and removing these discontinuities, and I might come back to this later. So for now we have a tune, but it does not sound like a real instrument, just a series of tones. I could vary the tone by using a different wave format, sine, sawtooth, square, but they don't sound like real instruments. Okay, an introduction to harmonics. What is a harmonic? According to Google, a harmonic is a wave or signal whose frequency is an integral multiple of the frequency of the same reference signal or wave. When a musical instrument plays a note, say C0, at 16.35 Hz, it will also produce a sound at different amplitudes at 2 times that's 16.35, that is C1 at 32.7 Hz, and at 3 times G1 at 49 Hz, and 4 times, that is C2 at 65.41 Hz, 5 times, that's E2 at 82.41 Hz, 6 times, which is G2 at 98 Hz, 7 times, that is B flat 2 at 116.54 Hz, 8 times, which is C3 at 130.81 Hz, etc., etc., etc. These notes are the harmonics or overtones. This is a frequency of 440 Hz, fundamental frequencies. This is the first harmonic H1, also the 7th, the 8th and the 9th harmonic. I don't know if you... It's very difficult to see the 8th harmonic, but they're all just been shown on one on top of each other. These are actually added together. And it produces that waveform. All physical as against the electronic instruments produce harmonics. The relative amplitude of a harmonic will vary greatly between different instruments, and also within the instrument, and to a lesser extent by the frequency of the note. These harmonics will give the instrument the greatest part of its characteristic sounds. As a general point, but not always, the higher harmonics will have reduced amplitudes. As the harmonics of a note are always integer multiples of the fundamental note, they must have a higher frequency. But the higher frequencies will at one point be above the highest frequency the human ear can hear. So the number of heard harmonics drops off with frequency and your age. The best information I have on organ pipes harmonics I've found on the internet are from Colin Pyack and include observations on an organ pipe sound. And they are very involved papers. He has a lot of information. Microsoft's AI Bing was absolutely useless in this regard, looking for harmonics. One of my readings of Colin in one of his papers on organ pipes was, we took 10 examples of different organ tones, 5 flutes and 5 principals, and represented the harmonic spectrum of each one as a string of 19 numbers. We plotted each of the 19 numbered strings as a point in a 19-dimensional hyperspace. Blah, 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 blah. I don't suppose Colin knew much about APL. It would have helped him, I'm sure, a lot. There are thousands of organ pipes out there, and each will have its unique sound, mainly dependent on the harmonics it produces. However, all organ pipes fall into one of two categories. They can be either open or closed, sometimes called stopped. Closed pipes tend to produce the odd-numbered harmonics with much greater amplitude than even harmonics, while open pipes produce both even and odd-number harmonics. In the extreme, a sawtooth wave can be built up from just odd harmonic numbers, and a square wave from both odd and even harmonics. The flute pipe spectra gift, I think I can find it here. shows the relative decibels for each harmonic of the five different organ pipes. You may notice that the scales are logarithmic. You've got decibels down the side and the harmonics across. As you can see, they drop down quite quickly, different ones. So some have a lot more harmonics than others. I have read off all the decibel levels for each of these pipes and entered them into my APL function harmonics. And here you can see the decibel levels which I put in. I convert the decibel levels into ratios, reduction ratios is my term. A 10 decibel reduction is a reduction of a half, 20 decibels by a quarter. So those are the different pipes I've tried typing in. Because of reasonable musical loudness, it goes from very, very loud, that is FFF, down 90 decibels, down through FF, F, MF, MP, P, PP, to the very, very soft PPP at 20 decibels. I've adjusted the maximum decibel levels to be 90 decibels rather than the 60s shown in the graphs. So there, you can see they're going right down to 10 decibels. It's very quiet indeed. The results can be heard in flute harmonic stop wave. From online information from Colin that Colin has provided, I am working on an algorithm to produce a range of organ-like sounds dependent on a few parameters, such as the 6 decibels per octave and the node points. Here you can see a pipe where the decibels goes up to the 4th harmonic before it drops down at about 6 decibels, then at a later point at a different angle. I still need to do a lot more work in this area, and I'm still using the handcrafted values as I showed you in the harmonics which I've just played. The bodies of organ pipes are generally made in 3 shapes: cylindrical, conical, and rectangular. Cylindrical pipes are simple cylinders, while conical pipes are the shapes of a tapering or expanded cone. Rectangular pipes form a cuboid shape with either a square or rectangular cross-section when viewed from above, according to Wikipedia. At present, I have not attempted to produce the different harmonics or envelopes these different waves produce, as I have no real knowledge of the physics, nor have I looked into the different materials used, such as wood, glass or metal. Sound envelopes. Another characteristic of an instrument is its sound envelope. This defines the sound amplitude across the note as it is being played. It is often split into 4 distinct phases: ADSR, attack, decay, sustain, and release. The release is when you release the note on the keyboard. I hadn't realised that. So the note is being played from the start of the attack when the key is pressed, and the key is released at that point, and then the continuation depends on the instrument. However, a church organ has a very short attack phase, no decay phase, an indefinitely long sustain phase, and a very short release phase, almost like a square wave. So the attack is very short, much steeper than that, and the release is also very much steeper. Initially, I did not even bother with an envelope. However, since the envelope helps prevent the pops and clicks that discontinuities in the sound wave can create, remember Ode to Joy, I've added a very simple organ envelope to my code. Just out of interest, I've attempted to make sound envelopes for other instruments. Here is a simplified piano envelope I tried. I think far less successful was my attempt at a bassoon. This really didn't work. Yes. I'm gonna cut it off. That really is awful. So much for sound the instrument makes. What about the effects of the environment? As J.S. Bach is known to have exploited the acoustics of certain buildings, I thought I should take this into account. Classical organs are typically found in cathedrals and churches. These have large halls with multiple sound-reflecting surfaces, producing multiple echoes known as reverberation. The Wikipedia entry states, reverberation is created when a sound or signal is reflected. This causes numerous reflections to be built up and then decay as the sound is absorbed by the surfaces of the objects in the space, which include furniture, people, and air. This is most noticeable when the sound source stops, but the reflections continue, their amplitude decreasing until zero is reached. So my next task was to add some reverb. Cathedrals often have a very long reverberation time, a 60 decibel drop in sound over 10 seconds. It has been measured in some locations. This is great for Gregorian chants maybe, but to my mind that level of reverb is well over the top for most music. I decided to try to add a reverb that would reduce by 60 decibels over a 2-second period, which I've been told is typical of a large concert hall. Although I've not fully achieved that yet, I'm fairly happy with the current effect, but this is still very much work in progress. Now, this is a reverb. This is without reverb. And this is with reverb. I'll play that again. I'm quite happy with that for the time being. The last bit I'm going to talk about is animation. It is an attempt to show the notes being played at any moment, as I showed earlier with the flute harmonics. The note's pitch, the frequency, goes from left to right and across the image, from C0 to B7, B6. Note the black and white piano-styled keyboard at the bottom. The very thin grey lines, vertical lines, separate each octave across the keyboard. So octave 0, octave 1, octave 2, so C0 to C to B0, C1 to B1, etc., up to 6. The thick vertical lines are the notes. The colour dependent on the pipe or pipes playing the note. Note that if I stop the animation, the sound continues as if it was out of sync. If I was not playing there a live one, but a recording of one, which is why I was able to stop it. The MP4 files are simply recordings from a window showing the animation as a sound wave is being played. On my PC under Windows version 10, pressing a combination of Windows key Alt and R starts the recording. Putting this all together in stereo, here is my current rendition of Bach's famous Toccata and Fugue in D minor, BMV 565. Write the music. That is writing out all 143 bars and adding the reverb. So if I now try playing it, hope you enjoyed that. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you, but if you've got any questions, I hope I will be available on Zoom to answer them. Thank you.